I am 100% guilty myself. I have never intentionally went and got my blood pressure checked. It's just not something that's on my radar. And there are several people like me who are going throughout life without knowing what their blood pressure is. What do you have to say to somebody like
Yeah,
me?
that's not a 15-yard penalty. That's like a 50-yard penalty.
What's going on, you guys? Thank you so much for tuning back into the Culture of Health podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you are following the podcast on your favorite podcast channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel because we got some bangers coming your way. On this episode, I set out to answer the question, why are Black people more prone to developing high blood pressure than their white counterparts? And for this episode, I couldn't think of anybody better to ask these questions to other than Dr. Bruce Alpert. Dr. Bruce Alpert has been a physician for several years. He's a board certified doctor. He sits on the board of hospitals. He sits on the board of committees that regulate what blood pressure monitors we're supposed to be using. And he's published dozens of studies that looks at the differences in blood pressure between Black people and other populations in this country. Before we dive into the podcast, I want to ask you guys a question. Do you always trust your gut? We hear all the time that we should trust our gut, but can we actually trust it? You might be thinking yes. I'm thinking no. Sometimes maybe. The answer is it really depends on your gut health, because your gut health and your brain are actually intricately connected, and how you see, feel, and experience the world is influenced by the signals being sent by your gut. So if your gut health is off, it may not be trustworthy. And that's why supporting your gut is one of the most important aspects of improving your overall quality of life, and I'll stand on that until I die. You can do this by getting enough fiber in your diet, but let's be honest, that's not always easy when you're busy or when your kids are picky eaters like some of ours. That's why we love using Fiber Mix by Supergut. The resistant starch feeds the good bacteria in your gut, decreases the population of bad bacteria, and can help you feel full, sustain healthier weight, and even improve your blood sugar. Personally, my favorite thing about the powder is that you can mix it in just about anything. We put it into kids' smoothies, we put it into kids' spaghetti, we put it into kids' oatmeal. Guess what? They had absolutely no idea it was in there. And they complimented us after finishing each of those meals. Supergut's Fiber Mix is an easy way to kickstart your gut into being a more trustworthy co-pilot for your brain. If improving your gut health is a priority for you, I highly recommend you check out Supergut's Fiber Mix. I left a link in the show notes for you to check out this dope product and some of the other cool things they have to offer that help you improve your gut health. All right, let's dig into this episode with Dr. Bruce Alpert. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a little bit about Dr. Bruce Alpert, and a previous conversation that I had with one of his colleagues, Dr. Lustig, brought him in, highly recommended. He has been, as you already heard, studying high blood pressure for a very long time, very specifically the differences between high blood pressure in certain populations, which as a Black American is very interesting to me, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bruce. Bruce, again, I just asked you, but how's it going? How you doing? How's life?
Doing great. We just had our 10th grandchild born, so we're going to go up and visit her next week. So things are, pretty joyful for the holiday season.
Yeah, that's awesome. So of course, we're going to get into like all the science of high blood pressure, but most importantly, you have a long list of achievements, publications, but perhaps the most important thing is that you've brought 5 children of your own into this world, and now you've got 10 grandkids to show for it. I'm sure that makes you very proud.
Absolutely. And their parole officers say they're doing well. So
I've never heard it explained that way, but that sounds about right. All right, well, check it out, Bruce. So I've got a long list of questions here, but I want to kind of get started. I was going through some of your publications and mind blown with some of the stuff that I've learned, which I will ask you about shortly. But I want to know, you've been studying this for so long, and I want to know why you decided to focus on like the disparities in high blood pressure between Black populations and the rest of the populations in America. What was it that piqued your interest that made you want to like take a deeper look at that?
Well, my first year at the Medical College of Georgia, 1984, 1979, we did a study of exercise in children to match up against some data that were collected the previous summer. And there was a large sickle cell clinic in Augusta, and my boss had exercised on a bicycle, 184 Black kids between the ages of 6 and 15. And so as soon as I got there, it's like, wait a minute, why don't we do a bunch of white kids and do comparisons? Because historically, as you well know, and I'm sure your listeners well know, the incidence severity of hypertension in the Black population far exceeds that in many other populations, especially the comparable Caucasians. And so that summer in 79, I had two medical students, and we went out to a summer camp. And at the end of the summer, we had exercised 221 white kids, and the statisticians went to work. And the thing that really jumped out was that at rest, the blood pressures were equal, and the amount of work that they could do, the duration of exercise, was virtually identical. But the Black kids had higher systolic, the higher number blood pressure at peak exercise than did the white kids.
Hmm.
And it's like, wait a minute, here's a stressful situation, physical stress, not, necessarily mental stress. It's like, wait a minute, maybe we've unlocked something that will give us an insight before these kids get older and evolve their high blood pressure in their young adult life. And just by happenstance, a psychologist was there as a visiting professor, and he said, whoa, wait a minute, we've just done a comparable number of college students, and we've used a mental stressor, a video game, and our results are literally identical to yours. At rest, they are equivalent, but mental stress, Blacks have higher blood pressures. So we immediately instituted a study of same age kids doing a video game. Back then, it was a simple Pong game that no self-respecting 6-year-old would play anymore today. But we found the same trend, and then over the years evolved other stressors in healthy, everyday, normal blood pressure kids, and the same pattern emerged. And then I don't know whether you want me to continue now, but we evolved at looking at what was behind this difference in blood pressure.
That is what I was just about to ask you. So I want you to continue.
Okay.
What is that difference? So is it a biological thing where Black people just have higher blood pressure and it's okay for them, like it's normal? Or is it still something that causes an increased risk for cardiovascular disease?
I mean, clearly, it's the second thing. The high blood pressure is not okay for anybody. If you
Mm.
look at stroke, heart attack, kidney damage, blindness, all the target organ effects of populations from high blood pressure, Blacks have earlier onset, more severe. And so it's a question of, let's back it up in time and say, what is it? We have this stress paradigm, and clearly, if you look in the social situation, there are a lot of stressors at home related to poverty, related to neighborhood crime, related to that. Although we did not have any specific data based on zip code crime, that kind of stuff. But from a standpoint of what is it in the biology, we evolved a set of stressors where we put the kids in a cool room at about 50 degrees, and then in a hot room about 100 degrees, and looked at the differences in the substances that get secreted. And either your blood vessels don't expand enough, causing the high blood pressure, or during the cold, the blood vessels constrict. Is it under dilation or is it overzealous constriction? And the data were very clear. It's overzealous constriction. So the next I looked into what are the substances that the body secretes that lead to blood vessel constriction. And from there, we went into what are the genes that control the secretion of those substances, and very promising early data relating to the secretion of transmitters. Unfortunately, in our expansion, we had done 500 kids. The statisticians showed us from a genetic standpoint, we needed 1,500. So we were going to do 500 more in Augusta and 500 more in up in Milwaukee, where one of our investigators and our team had moved to take a new position there. He was going to run another 500 under the exact same circumstances. Unfortunately, the NIH decided that no more money was coming our way. And so a very promising line of research that could have identified individuals during childhood at the highest risk for high blood pressure. And then, of course, the $1 billion question is, okay, if you can identify them, what can you do? Is it actual treatment of some sort? And we were never able to achieve any of that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So when you really like get to the root of it, you look at high blood pressure and you look at what's causing the blood vessels to constrict. Can you tell me again, what was it that was being secreted that was causing the blood pressures to the vessels to
There,
constrict?
there are various neurotransmitters that cause the vessel, what's called renin-angiotensin system, that is from the kidney, or local catecholamines that like epinephrine, that kind of stuff, that also have vasoactivity. And as I said, we had differences in the activity of the genes that controlled those substances. We were not actually able to draw enough blood over a short period of time during the stress to prove that it was this versus that versus that. Because
Mm-hmm.
obviously in children, blood drawing on healthy kids is not the easiest thing to do, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you've gotten to the point where you lost funding from the NIH on what seemed to be like a groundbreaking discovery on how to take a different approach to treat high blood pressure. Um, where do you go
But
from there?
clearly,
Hey, you guys. So I'm a personal contractor, and one of the things that's difficult for people who don't have a W-2 job is finding insurance. Oof, it's a pain in the butt. Listen, man, you gotta make sure you're enrolling at the right time of the year. You gotta choose between several different plans. You have to determine your proper income levels to figure out whether or not you qualify for a subsidy. It can all be really confusing, and it's so helpful having people walk you through that process. That's why I wanna tell you guys about Access Benefit Consultants. This isn't just any old company, this is my parents' company. My mom and dad have been helping people get insurance since I was a baby, and that hasn't changed over the past few years. Currently, Access Benefits helps independent contractors like me secure insurance through the marketplace, and they help me do it at the lowest price possible. When you've got a big family like myself, it's pretty much impossible to avoid accidents, and that's why it's so important to have your bases covered with the right coverage. And Access Benefit Consultants help me with that. If you're an independent contractor like myself and you want to know how much coverage might cost you, you should go to accessbenefits.com. They have a tool on there that allows you to quote your health insurance, and you don't even have to talk to anybody. If you do want to talk to somebody, which I recommend that you do, they have a phone number there. You can give them a call. They have a contact form that you can fill out, and one of their agents will be in touch with you in no time. It's the quickest way, the most accurate way to get the coverage you need at the lowest price available, and knowing that the people that you're dealing with are trustworthy. Access Benefit Consultants helps me with my insurance. They could probably help you too.
The message that we were trying to get across is, if we can prevent the high
Right.
blood pressure from ever occurring, then you don't need to try to treat it, try to cope with the complications that everybody knows very, very well in the adult community. And one just looks at population statistics, and clearly from a public health standpoint, if you could really get to the root of this in a particular minority community, the morbidity, mortality, public health cost would, an enormous progress. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, that chain, and we were not aware of people who kind of picked it up in other universities and ran with it quite the same. There are other centers, primarily in what's called behavioral medicine, that
Hmm.
continue to do work such as this, but I kind of lost touch after a while. After I got to be a big deal in blood pressure measurement, I had to shift from one to the other.
Got you. So let me understand. So there's neurotransmitters, kidney, like so many different factors that are causing the blood vessels to constrict, which leads to high blood pressure. What is it about stress? If we know, what is it about stress that causes these gene mutations, if that's what they are, to cause the blood vessels to constrict? Is there how stress impacts the body?
I'm not quite sure I understand the the question, but everybody from dinosaurs has had the fight flight reaction. If you see somebody approaching you with a baseball bat and a very mean look, you're probably not going to want to have a nice conversation with that guy. You're going to want to either get the heck out of there or be prepared for for a conflict. Ranges of animals have had this self-protective kind of thing, and so it's a question of we're pre-programmed from a million generations that certain stressors lead to certain reactions. So if in fact there is a difference in the genetics, that certain things are what's called upregulated. In other words, if we do a stress on me versus you may react with 50% more excretion of substance X compared
Hmm.
to me. And that
Hmm.
may bring your blood pressure up 20% higher than it does in me to that stressor.
Hmm.
So that as most high level science has evolved over the last 20 years, genetics is the be all and end all. One of the things when people have asked me, what's the best thing to do in order to keep my blood pressure in check, my first answer is choose better parents, because the the genes that they gave you obviously are not the healthiest. But there's nothing you can do about that as yet.
All
Clearly,
right.
gene therapy for certain things is actually, no, maybe even relatively practical in certain very rare diseases. But from a standpoint of, if one looks at the general stress in a poverty community, you're going to say, something like cortisol is a substance that has been studied for 30-40 years. Those reactions lead to the more definitive type reactions.
Right. So we can't choose better parents. So knowing that, like that begs a question almost like if someone, well, and actually it's kind of vindicating because a lot of us, a lot of people in general, when you're diagnosed with high blood pressure, high blood sugar, or whatever the case is, one of the first things you want to do is blame yourself and say, well, this is my fault. Either I'm not exercising enough and I'm not eating right. And especially in the case of high blood pressure, there's a popular quote that says lifestyle or disease is 20% genetics and 80% lifestyle. And I think that what you just said kind of tilts the scale in the opposite direction a bit.
Obviously, you've talked with Dr. Lustig in great detail, and probably on at least one or two of these podcasts. And sugar is the culprit in the diseases that he studies. We've done a lot of work years ago in the Memphis City school system, as well as in a county at the very northwest tip of Tennessee called Obion County. We've looked at diet, specifically the salt intake,
Hmm.
and everybody and his brother, if you ask them, will tell me, is salt intake in the Black community a lot higher or a lot higher And it turns out, no, it's not.
Mhm.
People are kind of getting the message, and they're feeding their children, at least a comparable amount of salt. It's probably more than we need in both, in every population for sure,
Mhm.
especially in prepared foods. You go to McDonald's and you get the salty French fries, and it's like the pickle on the hamburger. And then, of course, you have to have your shake, and a whole lot about that kind of stuff. So it might appear that in blood pressure, genetics is a higher percentage. The problem is nobody has taken a population from birth and done a full genetic workup and followed them for 40 years to see exactly what it is and what can we do about it. But
Yeah.
in general, of course, everybody should exercise more, everybody should be leaner, everybody should try to get rid of stressful things in their life. But it's a question of at least United States lifestyle. There's a whole lot of bad going on.
Right. So I think that coming back to this stress, I think that obviously stress is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to high blood pressure because of how it impacts the physiology and causes the blood vessels to do certain things, that fight or flight um, response that we all have. What are some, in your opinion, like modern day stressors that are kind of flying under the radar, but that are contributing to this becoming such a big issue?
Well, I'm clearly not an expert on this kind of stuff, so I'll just throw out some speculation. But especially if you live in an urban area, getting from point A to point B, hassling with traffic, with public transportation, running to get someplace on time, and there are people fighting you all the way to get in your way. Clearly, in business, the more you get done, the better people think of you. So there's always if I just stayed another half an hour, I could get this other project finished, and the boss will smile at me. If you look at the calendars of many kids in high school, they have extracurriculars, they have sports, they have time with their friends. They're so overcommitted, they don't have time just to sit and relax and do this or that. And of course, they're always on their phones playing some kind of games where people are killing each other and blowing things up. That's the kind of scenario that we use in our video game research. We told the kids to play the first game, see how well you can score. Whatever they scored on the first game, our answer was this always the same. It's like, well, you did pretty well, but most kids did a little better than that. You need to try harder, do better on the next game. And they play the next game, and most of the kids actually, because familiarity, they did do better. And then after the second game, we said, "Oh, you're really starting to do well this time. If you can increase your score by a certain percentage, like 20%, we actually have money for you." And they didn't know how cheap the NIH was, that the maximum they were getting, it was $5. We look like a relatively above board operation. So they, in fact, tried harder. And when you looked the blood pressure at rest and then the first game and the second, the different games, the higher the blood pressure went. So,
Hmm.
so we know that under a more demanding mental stress situation, your blood pressure is driven higher. So anything that really, frustrates you, if you have the wrong genetics, your blood pressure is going to go up. Now, there are plenty of people whose blood pressures stay at 110 over 70, well into their 70s, 80s. It's like, what in the world did you do right?
Yeah.
And often there's no right answer. They smoke and they're overweight, but their whole body picture is such that,
Mm.
it hasn't affected their blood pressure.
Yeah. Wow. That's that. Especially for somebody like me, I love to do all the right things. You eat right, you exercise, you do everything to de-stress. And then at the end of the day, you ask yourself how much of that is really truly contributing to my overall well-being versus my genetics that have carried me to the point where I'm at now. Something about that video game study was interesting to me. I saw that you guys, the first time you did it was in an urban area, and then you guys went and replicated it in a rural area in Tennessee. And you guys found very similar results. And basically what it came down to was that you guys determined that mostly this was you guys looking at cardiovascular reactivity, and it was mostly due to race and social environment that was causing whatever fluctuations. But that made me wonder if those acute fluctuations in blood pressure while they were playing the game have any sort of long-term predictability for a person's ability to regulate their blood pressure. Hey, I know you're enjoying the podcast so far. So I know at this point you might be wondering, all this talk about high blood pressure, what are some simple things that I can do to support my overall health? And I got you. I want to talk to you guys about one of the partners of our podcast, Athletic Greens. Have you guys ever started a supplement routine that you ended up dropping after just a few weeks because you couldn't keep up with it? I have, you have, we all have. I honestly believe we all start the day with the intention to treat our bodies better, but if your wellness routine isn't sustainable, then it's not very likely that you'll benefit from it. And that's just a fact. That's one of the main reasons I decided to give AG1 a try, because as a busy family man with 4 young kids, I needed a solution that I could actually implement every day. So I take it every morning while I'm cooking breakfast, and it makes me feel good knowing that I'm covering my nutritional bases before I get swept away by my busy schedule. AG1 is made with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients, which is extremely valuable due to the fact that our food sources aren't nearly as robust in macronutrients as they used to be. Again, when it comes to doing things that improve your health, it really boils down to your habits. And for me, implementing AG1 into my morning routine continues to be a piece of cake, and who knows, maybe it'd be a piece of cake for you too. So, if you want to take ownership of your health, today is a good time to start. Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/TCHP to take advantage of that. That's athleticgreens.com/TCHP. I want you guys to check that out. While we're on the topic of health, I want to talk to you guys about Levels. If you follow me on any of my social platforms, you'll know how much of a serious fan I am of this company and the dope people behind it. They're building tech that helps people see how food is affecting their health through continuous glucose monitoring. I've personally been monitoring my glucose with Levels for over a year now, and bruh, it has completely changed the way I eat. Let me explain this simply. You have sugar in your blood, which is a primary source of energy, but when your blood sugar is spiking all the time or just elevated in general, it can cause a pretty severe health complication. It can also lead to less severe complications like brain fog, always being tired, unstable mood, and even impaired sexual function. Man, you guys, so many of us experience these symptoms on a daily basis and have no idea why. And that's why I love Levels, because it gives you a window into your health by showing you how your diet and habits are impacting your glucose levels. I'm a huge advocate of accepting full responsibility for your health, and Levels makes that a lot easier by showing you in real time how your body is metabolizing food. Monitoring my blood sugar helped me see which food I should be staying away from, which ones I should be eating more of, what order to eat my food in, how to structure exercise around my meals, and so much more. I don't know for sure, but I think you learn similar things if you took a peek underneath the hood, and I highly encourage you to do so. And look, you don't have to monitor your glucose for a year like I did. Just a month of monitoring your glucose will teach you enough about your body to power new habits for the rest of your life. So, I'm inviting you to give Levels a try. I left a special link in the show notes for you that'll give you 2 additional months on top of your annual membership. Keep me posted on your experience and let me know if there's anything that I could do to help you as you pursue optimal metabolic health by monitoring your glucose with Levels.
Well, as you have read in that study, there were a set of nurses in Union City, Tennessee, which is in Obion County, and they started a prospective study when the kids were in 1st or 2nd grade, doing their height, their weight, their blood pressures, and they called us and said, hey, we need some ideas of what'll make this more interesting and more predictive. So I think we started with the video game in 3rd grade course, this is a bunch of years ago, and we did the video game virtually every year. Sometimes we would do a hand grip challenge as well one year, and then near the end we would do a cold stressor where we'd put an ice pack on their forehead, which is an uncomfortable thing for sure. The most important take home message was the video game blood pressure reactivity in like third, fourth, fifth grades was the best predictor of resting blood pressure when you got to be a high school junior or senior.
Wow.
So it's a question of stress reactor people who, maybe, we don't have enough people with enough data to say, okay, we're going to exercise you. We're going to do a video game. We're going to have you do a this or that, 4 or 5 different stressors every year for 20 years and see what's the best predictor and what's the combination of things. But clearly the behavioral medicine psychology folks have been looking at reactivity now for at least 40 years, and they have very elegant findings, so that it looks like cumulative stress is something that leads to higher resting blood pressures,
Hmm.
and of course higher reactivity blood pressures when you're older and you're still under stress.
Right.
One I think for the adults, blood pressure devices that you can go buy in the pharmacy are very inexpensive. And if you will buy one that looks good and the pharmacist says, yeah, we've had good luck with that one, they're literally $50 or less. You need to take it to your doctor's office and sit down with the nurse and have them take your blood pressure, whatever they use in their office to decide what your real blood pressure is, and compare those readings to the device that you purchased. So, and you can kind of keep a diary at home, take it in the morning, take it in the evening. Um, and home blood pressure has gotten to be an enormously powerful modality in the diagnosis and treatment of high blood pressure, to where it's much more accurate than one office blood pressure, even done
Hmm.
carefully. So the more pressures you can do, the better. And there's a technology called 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure, which is expensive. Takes a lot of training. The units, sometimes break down, and it's a pain for people to go and have their blood pressure taken every 20 minutes for 24 hours.
Hmm.
But home blood pressure is almost as powerful a predictor. If people want to really start taking care of themselves from a blood pressure standpoint, there's a very easy way to do that.
Got you. Bruce, you said something. I'm going to come back to what you just said because I know that you sit on a few different committees that look at the effectiveness of blood pressure devices and how sometimes people can go either underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. But I want to ask you a question first. You said that cumulative stress is a good predictor for, I guess, just blood pressure and whether or not someone will have high blood pressure in the future. And that made me think of like how we raise our kids. So I'm not sure how you were raised, but how I was raised in my community, it's very, it could be intense sometimes. There's spanking, yelling. I'm not going to put my parents out there. My mom's going to call me after listening to this. I, I had a good childhood. My parents were decent, but because of how, we want to raise our children to go into the world and be productive, there's oftentimes approach from a very aggressive standpoint. And when you said cumulative stress, that just made me think of that because a lot of children experience a lot of stress at home. And I'm wondering if that could potentially contribute to their propensity for developing high blood pressure as adults.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people in the behavioral medicine research field that have looked at the effects. Obviously, when I was growing up, education was very important in our household. It was not a matter of, are you going to go to college? It's which Ivy League college are you going to go?
Yeah.
Since my dad went to Dartmouth, I went to Dartmouth, and then because I went to Dartmouth, my 3 sons went to Dartmouth. Um, and they haven't named a building or anything, for us. But I know in one generation ago, there are certain cultures, Asian especially, and people from India, Pakistan, where education is really, really, really stressed. Both meanings of that word, to where achievement is kind of above all. Look to those communities to produce the next generation of NBA players. They're the next CEOs, the doctors, the lawyers, that kind of stuff. So it's a matter of there are different types of cultural norms that lead to different kinds of stress. For my own situation in medical school, people talked about the lower your blood pressure and the lower your cholesterol, the longer you're going to live. And so even though I didn't have high blood pressure, my mom had very high cholesterol. Mine was like, not high, but not low. So I've been on both blood pressure and cholesterol medicines now for, I don't know, at least 4 years, and both of them are under excellent control. So I'm hoping I get to, and get on the Smucker's jar on the Today Show, with my 100th day. So it's really a matter of your cultural norms, have spankings. You look at the kids today, no one got spanked, in the last, well, at least in many cultures, in the last 20 or 30 years. And now we have a generation who sit and play on their phone and won't go to work. So, maybe there's something that, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
I, again, I'm not the expert. So,
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I would much rather, I'm sure many of us, our society would be better if we had productive children with high blood pressure than lazy kids with no high blood pressure. Productive, maybe productive with no high blood pressure is ideal.
Correct.
I have so many other questions, but I want to get back to what you said about measuring blood pressure. I am 100% guilty myself. I have never intentionally went and got my blood pressure checked. It's just not something that's on my radar. And there are several people like me who are going throughout life without knowing what their blood pressure is. What do you have to say to somebody like me?
That's not a 15-yard penalty. That's like a 50-yard penalty. Okay. When you go to your doctor's office, if you ever set foot in there, they're going to take your blood pressure, and clearly on the committees that I've sat on, I've learned an enormous amount about the measurement of blood pressure by automated devices. In other words, your doctor's office, very few sit you down, put the cuff on your arm, get the stethoscope out, listen, and they just slap the cuff on and they press the button, and boom, there's a number on the screen. The problem is each manufacturer has a computer program called an algorithm, which takes all the impulses felt through the cuff and analyzes them. And over thousands of readings, they have written this computer program, and it's relatively accurate on about 100 people when they have to do their study for the FDA. But the mean difference, the average difference, has to be between a gold standard, like listening with a stethoscope, has to be within about 5, but what's called the standard deviation of a distribution is plus or minus 8. So a lot of times in various disciplines, you can accept 1.5 standard deviations, one side or the other, and you're normal. Well, if, for instance, we take 8 and 1.5 standard deviations is 12 up or 12 down. So if I told you, well, this machine will tell your blood pressure accurately within 24, you'd go, that isn't worth, I'm not, unless it's free or unless you're paying me I'm not taking that.
Right.
So it's a matter of brand A and B and C. If you were to be sitting quietly and your blood pressure is not varying, those three devices will give you three different blood pressure readings. And that's why it's critical to go to your doctor and sit down, and compare the two. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we've just completed a study at Ohio State, and this Friday we have the planning meeting to write the paper. But this is a campaign that I've been on for a number of years, and I may as well have just been knocking my head against the wall because nothing has really changed. If you go to your doctor's office and they want to do your blood pressure, often you're in the exam room and they're putting you up on the examination table. And some of the requirements for the most accurate blood pressure is you have to be sitting for at least 3 or 4 minutes, quietly doing nothing, not talking, not anything. Your feet have to be flat on the floor. Your back has to be supported, on the back of the chair. And your arm has to be supported and it is held up at the level of your heart, not down your side. So if you sit up at an exam table, unless you have very unusual legs, your feet are nowhere near the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Your back can't possibly be supported, and your arm is just dangling at your side.
Yep.
So the preliminary data show that the difference between sitting in a chair with all those things being, you know, controlled looks to be about 6 to 8 millimeters systolic and 4 to 5 millimeters diastolic, and it's always higher on the exam table.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it's a matter of if you go to your doctor's office and they try to sit you on the exam table to do your blood pressure, you need to say no. You
Mm-hmm.
need to say, I've been instructed to sit in the chair so that my feet are on the floor, my back is supported, and no, my arm is not dangling. You need to provide something, either the nurse has to hold your arm up or there has to be a arm of the chair, something
Yeah.
so that your arm is right at the level of your heart. Because if you are up in the exam table and you get a blood pressure reading, of 145 over 100, and it goes in your medical record, well, your insurance people are going to say, what? I'm,
Mm.
high risk, I get rid of him. You have to be in charge of your own quality management because your doctor's office just hasn't gotten the message. We hope when we publish the paper sometime, by the time it gets in print, probably spring, um, maybe people will read it and change. But even in our university practice, the manometer with the blood pressure cuff was always on the wall next to the table where the ophthalmoscope and the otoscope, were. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's wrong. We have to get them off the wall and put them by the chair. And the administration of the hospital refused,
Mm.
said, no, that would be quite an expense and it would be much too cumbersome. And so we're just not going to do that. You figure out a way to do it yourself, you know.
So if people are going
So
to the doctor's office, which oftentimes creates stress on its own, and then on top of that, you're sitting in on this exam table, which is also sometimes stressful, and then you get your blood pressure measured, you can really walk out of that doctor's office with a misdiagnosis of high blood pressure. And if you're not checking your high blood pressure for yourself at home or anywhere else, then you walk throughout life thinking that your blood pressure is higher than it is.
yeah, and your doctor thinks and starts giving you medicines that make you feel crummy to
Mm,
control blood pressure that's in fact normal. And
right.
so the other side of the point is if the machine that you choose from the pharmacy says your blood pressure is 130 over 80, but it's really 145 over 90,
Mm-hmm.
then your high blood pressure has been missed and you're the one who's going to get the stroke, the heart attack, the blah blah blah.
Right.
They're a multi-pronged approach, and I hope some major corporation will make it their life's duty to take the message to the masses, because doctors, experts in blood pressure, have been unable to break into the family practice, internists, hospitals. We haven't been able to make inroads, and something's got to change.
Yeah. So it all
High
boils
blood
down
pressure
to
is.
personal responsibility is what it sounds like. So taking that from personal responsibility, and we've learned so much so far to kind of like put the cherry on top of the cake, or do you put cherry or on top of the ice cream?
Ice
Um,
cream, yeah.
got you. What are on top of, first of all, being aware of your blood pressure? Like I'm going to go do that this week to know where I am personally. What are some other things that we can do to mitigate our risk for developing high blood pressure? Because we can't choose new parents. I'm going to talk to my parents about that tonight, but since I can't replace them, what are some other tools that I have at my disposal to mitigate my risk?
Well, all of the things that the American Heart Association has been harping on for, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever. Obviously, manage your weight as well as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Lower your salt intake. Um, if you are raised with, not very salty foods, there's some evidence that says you learn that those foods taste just fine. You don't need to add extra salt.
Mm-hmm.
Or if somebody salts the food for you and you taste it and you go, oh, man, this is so salty, I can't eat it. And knowing your blood sugar, especially if you're overweight, because the complication of type 2 diabetes is obviously crazy common in people who are very overweight. And as you said, very first thing, exercise, getting out and doing, is an enormous part of staying healthy. Stress reduction is going to be different for everybody. Something that you find stressful, what's the big deal? To me, there's probably no way to take a stress inventory. Computer malfunction lead to high blood pressure in me, but you've learned to figure, what's the big deal? I know a way around that.
Yeah.
But old people like me, we just you know
Listen, computer
so
malfunction.
I think the thing to do is to send people to the American Heart Association website,
Yep.
and there are enormous number of tools
Mm-hmm.
that people can read and use, and they're always in urban areas. American Heart Association has local offices where you can actually go pick stuff up, take it to the school, take it to your place of work, take it, and try to get your friends, neighbors, colleagues, to buy into the concept. Refrigerator in the break room has nothing but unhealthy things. The temptation when you go to get your diet drink or your water is like, oh, that tastes a lot better than plain water. So clearly people like Dr. Lustig can give you, lots of tips, especially relating to sugar.
Right. Okay, Bruce, I think you just gave us a masterclass on blood pressure. I certainly have a better understanding of it. Any parting words? It may not even be blood pressure related. Give us some wisdom, the number one piece of wisdom you would give to, I don't know, somebody my age who wants to live a good life and have 10 grandkids like you.
Actually, we didn't talk at all about smoking. That's obviously from many, many standpoints, cancer, but also
Mm-hmm.
from blood pressure standpoint. And basically, it's common sense. Um, you know, Listen to your grandmother because she's going to tell you, she doesn't have to deal with you because your parents have to do that.
Yeah.
But look around and see, look at the ads for various things, and especially to control your blood sugar, control this and that. The people on the ads are all 50, 60 pounds overweight.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not exercising, they're not dieting, they're not, as you well know, looking at you, you've been able to live what appears to be quite a healthy life by just doing common sense type
Right.
things. Everybody in their heart of hearts, excuse the expression, knows what they should be doing. If it's like, well, I don't care if I die at 70, I'm going to enjoy smoking and eating and this and that. But when you get to be 69 and you're on six medicines and you're having a tough time getting around, you
Mm-hmm.
thought, this could be me at 90, not me at 70. Uh,
Right.
And you never have people other than, terminal cancer that said, geez, I wish I lived shorter. I don't really want to be around when my grandchildren graduate, and get married and have, give me great grandchildren.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people want to do
Yeah.
that. So I'm hoping to hold on. I had my dad's younger brother,
Hmm.
who was a dentist up in Washington, lived to be 104.
Wow.
So I'm hoping that those genes,
Yeah.
you know, that helped him, and my mom was lived to be 97. So I got longevity on both sides. So I'm counting on being a real burden to my grandchildren, when in my old age.
Continue to stick around, and if you keep doing the quality work that you're doing, we might have to come back and do this again.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure. And clearly, the biggest news of the day is Aaron Judge signed with the Yankees
Yeah.
and is going to get only $360 million for 9
Only.
years. Only. Now,
Only.
the question is, if you had a community center in a urban minority area and were able to give them $360 million, imagine what they could achieve with that.
Yeah.
We're in a very strange society,
Yes, we are.
but being a fanatic Yankee fan, we need Aaron Judge. I mean, whatever it takes to get him is worthwhile. Okay.
Yeah.
Whoever has to suffer. Now, the people who now go to Yankee Stadium, instead of the beer being $15, it'll be $25, and the
Right.
hot dogs will go up $5. Somebody's got to pay for all of that.
Yeah, but you guys might win.
So, well, we better.
Yeah.
We now need more pitching.
Yeah.
So, you always need more pitching.
Got you. All right, Bruce. I
All right.
really
Well, listen, it's been a pleasure, and
appreciate it.
I hope that people's awareness of monitoring their blood pressure, not only when they're in their 50s or 60s, but start literally in teenage years. It doesn't take any money or effort to do. Just a matter, you sit down and you take your little,
Yeah.
trusty device off
Yeah.
your desk and take your blood pressure.
Yeah.
It takes 30 or 40 seconds. You must have an extra 30 seconds in your life now to add 10 years to your life later.
Ooh, that was a bar. That's it. Yeah. And we all have that extra 30 seconds because we're all scrolling on our phones. I guarantee you.
Absolutely.
That sounds good. Well, I'm going to do my part to spread the
talking to you.
message. Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.